Hello, welcome to our TSA game, Unity 2018.4.10F1 for TSA 2019-2020, with the theme being sports games that is themed around the 2020 Olympics. Now, this is a pilot dev blog of sorts. I'm hoping to get more of these out showing my progress on the game, our progress on the game, but this one is certainly going to be a lot longer than the others because I'm basically going to go over everything we've done in the past month and a half, which is significant. So without further ado, let's get into this mess of a of a demo, basically. So I'll start where we started. We were wondering, are we going to do the standard pipeline in Unity? Are we going to do the high definition render pipeline, HDRP? Or are we going to do LWRP, the lightweight render pipeline? Now, of course, because we don't know what kind of computing power the judges are going to be running, LWRP or standard would be best. With that said, there's some nifty tricks that you can do for quite cheap and easily with the HDRP, or actually, no, not with LWRP, that we really wanted to try out. So over the summer, I got to trying this volumetric fog that you can see here, and this was actually the first scene we built when we were testing out HDRP for this game. Some context that's important is that the game is in a low poly art style, which helps quite a bit with art-wise. And last year's game that we made, which was also low poly, was actually open world and had a lot more that needed to be drawn. There were a lot of objects. This one's not like that at all. So we're hoping that because of it's a bit simpler, we won't have a problem with using HDRP in terms of FPS, and our testing seems to confirm that. So this is the first scene that we made. I went in and I grabbed some volumetric lights and I stuck them down, and I was like, okay, this looks cool, but it needs something. And simultaneously, I also wanted to mess around with the cloth component in Unity, which you can see here. Can I see the little dots? There they are. Yeah, so we started out wanting to mess around with some cloth, mess around with some fog, so we did that. And this model right here isn't mine. The actual flag is just a plane, and I messed around with it. It was originally, I think, flipped 90 degrees to the right. I took it, I put a Brazil texture on it, quite simple, and the actual cloth already had its basically rigging, where you put vertices on it, and then you can lock certain vertices, as you see here, and the rest of them will bend. So we can go ahead and run this, just so you can see what this actually looks like in game. And this is our first real test of the things that we wanted to run. You can see we've got some particles, we got some rain, we've got some fireflies going around, and we have the Unity cloth alongside the volumetric lighting from a cool angle and an FPS display at the top left. Very, very simple, but this was how we started this year's game with some stuff that we want to test out later. I'm going to refer to this as fog scene, so keep that in mind. I might not actually talk about this anymore, but we'll see. So when we moved on from there, I wanted to get some actual, maybe not playable things, but things that are going to be in the game done. So I moved on to some shaders, and I wanted to make a water shader, and that was something that we've had trouble with in the past, but using Unity's shader graph, it was done a bit more easily this time. So let me see if I can show you this easily. Can I go to the shader from here? It's opening in my other monitor. I'll drag it over in a second. But basically, the Unity shader graph is a node-based way of making shaders. Now, shaders control how things are rendered in Unity. So this absolute mess, basically all these different nodes plug in to this PBR master node, which controls the position of the object, the albedo of the object, which is like its texture and stuff, the normal maps, whether it's emissive, metallic, smooth, etc. And you can look more into this on your own, but basically this is how we achieved our water, and then I copied that and messed around with it a bit to make a sand shader, which is still heavily work in progress, but I haven't touched it in a while. This was mostly based off of a video that I found on how to make an ocean shader, and initially it looked very similar to that, but we've had plenty of our problems along the way, including the foam not working in this version of Unity. I don't know why, but regardless, we're here now. So we've got the water here. It's hard to tell in this version, or not in this version, but in this like view. It doesn't animate in scene view until you hit play and then stop it. and you have to make sure you've got your actual animation on, but you can tell from here briefly that it is animating. So we can go ahead and go back now and enable animated materials, and you'll see that the water does actually animate, and it's kind of hard to tell super well on this one because the background is non-existent. The sand does as well. It kind of shifts around a bit, but we can we can look at a slightly different. I also kind of like how there's depth here, so the transparency lets you see down into the cube, and you can see the water level changes as well. But we can go ahead and look at a slightly better example. This was my testing scene where I've stuck random stuff in and messed around with it. But if we go to a slightly better example, which I believe what the overworld will do, you'll be able to see this is a bit more of a massive production of the water, and this is Japan, where the 2020 Olympics are going to take place. So if we go ahead and play this, I'm not quite a fan of how the sun looks yet, but we can mess with it. We have a demo of our button, as you can see that UI animation, and you can see the water reflecting quite nicely. It's also kind of hard to tell, but the water level is actually going up and down on the shores of Japan, which is quite cool, and you can see some depth on it as well. So this water shader has turned out quite nicely. I like the gradient on the back as well, the Fresnel. So that was the next thing that we really hit up, was the shaders, and that's what I think convinced us to stay in HDRP, which is basically where we've committed now. Now since then, I'll go ahead and show you the downfall of my my contributions to this project. As you can see by our commit log, actually I'll just show it here. At the start of this year, we had a lot of crunch time here. I was really excited, got all these commits in, all these contributions. Some of them were to other repositories, to be fair, but a lot of it was to this one. And then there was a bit of a dead zone here, and only recently have I started going back. But I can show you based on the commits how that's affected the actual development of the game. So if we look at commits here, you'll see that if we go all the way back, you can see the stuff that I'm talking about: the cloth testing, the water shader testing, improving the water shader, some water tweaks. I tested the UI that you just saw. Started grass and water and sand shaders. We ended up scrapping the grass shader because we didn't really need it. And after this, while I was still working alongside these, I started working on some nighttime scenes. I wanted to see how we could take that fog that I initially implemented and start making it into a better scene, right? So I'll start with these swimming scenes, and this was for an old idea for the game. It's no longer what we're doing, but there's some remnant files that we'll probably end up using, so I've kept them around. This is a daytime version of what I imagined the swimming pool might look like, and it's a slightly different version of the shader, or the material rather, than what we use in the nighttime, with some different settings. So you've got your water there. Here's the water inside an actual stadium, and it's not animated because we need to start and stop it, obviously, but you get an idea. And we did model the stadium. All this is our work, as it typically is for our games. But I took this and I was like, all right, let's mess around with making it into a nighttime. So this was my first attempt at making the nighttime, and I think it looks quite cool. I will actually play this because I do love how it looks. I don't know if we're going to end up using something similar to this, but we may. Ignore the lights flickering. That can be fixed in post. I can put a point light on the actual light and it'll overshadow the flickering. But something else cool that we did here was that the water is just a plane. This water is just a plane. So it's completely flat, and it's just being displaced up and down by the shader. So what we thought would be cool to add some depth is I added some fog underneath the water right here, this density volume, which I can drag up and you can see it better, but you won't be able to see it obviously unless there's lights in the way. But this is the actual fog that I added underneath. And I added some lights into the walls of the water to basically make it look like there's underwater lighting, and the fog helps with some depth as well. And then I just sort of tweaked the positioning of the lights and the intensity for a while before I got something that I quite liked. And I think this looks really cool. So I took these things, these properties that I had made for swimming, and I got started on volleyball, which again has changed a lot, but this is another demo of what it might look like in the day, and this was the first full-scale night test that I tried to make. So we've got way more powerful lights all around the outside, and we've got our little guy in there, quite neato, and I've actually gone ahead and turned this scene into the demo that we can run. So if I go into game, you'll see a sneak peek of what it is that I've been working on recently since I've come back to contributing. But you can see how this has come along. All of our custom models, the sand shader, the character, which I made in Maya, and rigged and animated using Oculus Connects for motion capture. And then just some good lighting and some fog systems, which I think look quite cool. And the sand shader still needs some work, especially once we put the character in, which only happened recently. You'll notice that because the displacements are fairly large, it looks way too uneven from ground level. From above, it looks great, but from here, it looks way too uneven compared to the height of the character. So I'll need to mess around with that a little bit more and tune it, but I do think it's coming along nicely. And the displacements are entirely done by normal maps. This is very similar to the water shader, but this is the night sand material with the sand shader. And you'll go ahead and see how this looks. Kind of cool. Now, I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. Sorry, morning voice. I woke up a few minutes ago. Okay. Now, this just won't tighten. Okay. Now, what have I been doing recently, right? This is where we dropped off, basically, before the great departure, when I stopped working for a little bit. And I came back, and I was like, okay, we're bottlenecked because this is a rhythm game that we're making. We're bottlenecked by the fact that my musicians still need to go make music, and I can't really handcraft the levels until they've made music. So what can I make? Well, I can make a way for us to make the levels later. And we didn't really know how it was that we wanted to have notes scroll by. Initially, we thought, okay, so the character animates, and maybe the notes will like pop up on his arms as he's like boxing or whatever it is, the sport that we want to show. And then you would press them. But we thought that, as I was trying to build this, I thought that that would be way too, not only unintuitive, but kind of a visually impairing means of doing that for the user. The player would have to be darting their eyes all across the screen, and camera angles, if they changed a lot, would make it hard for this to be an actual, maybe not competitive, but consistent game, which is kind of what we wanted. So I've gone ahead and tried for something a bit different, just a classic lane scroller type thing where the notes can come down. And I'll just go ahead and play this for you, and then we'll go into how we made this happen, because there's a lot more to it. So, oh, is it not going to scroll the notes? This was working a minute ago. Intriguing. It seems that... yes, this is the unrefined version of this script. I had a lot of problems last night, and it seems we didn't get around to fixing all of them. Oh, wait. Oh, no. This is just the this is just the volleyball night scene. This is the really old version of this. Okay, let me go to the proper one. I've made a copy of this, and I've actually called it properly what it is, which is Rhythm Demo. It looks almost identical, as you can tell, but behind the curtains is completely different. So I'll go ahead and try that again, play this for you, so you can see how this works. You'll notice the music starts. This is music that we made last year. The notes start coming down to the beat of the song. And right now I'm pressing those keys on my keyboard according to the lane to pop the notes. If I don't, they just fade out, as you can see. Kind of neat, and it keeps track of your notes hit, notes missed, whatever. And the animation that you were seeing in the background, which I can just let it play one more time, is just of one of our members, Matthew Mohall, doing a kick in front of our Kinect sensors after doing some punching, and I put some trail trackers on there, which is my idea for combos, which I want to implement in the coming days. Right now it's just a stationary animation. Obviously there would be an actual sport going on in the background as you did this, and your actions would somewhat influence the sport. Now, how did this come to be, right? Are these procedurally generated, yada yada yada? Well, for that I have to reference the thing that I made first, which is, this is Rhythm Demo, this is Rhythm Maker. So what we do is we wanted to be able to actually handcraft the experience, because if we just randomly generate the notes, then it can get wacky, it can get not fun, and there can be a lack of consistency, so you can't really practice if you want to, right? So the idea was, I need to make a song maker, a level editor, essentially. But how am I going to do that inside of the Unity editor and still, or inside of the actual game and still be able to use the Unity editor? Well, my initial idea was, here's what I'll do, right? I'll pick the song that I want, and right now I have it generating a waveform at the bottom. This is the song picker. And let's say we have AutoGen on, we can hit start, and it'll start going through the song, and it'll randomly generate notes as we go along. And if I go to the actual UI here, all it's doing is just generating notes at the top here, and then there's a scroller object that's scrolling them down. The actual notes are staying in their own place, they're just getting scrolled down by this scroller object. So my idea was, you'll go ahead and you'll auto-generate these things, and you'll notice that they, oh, right now they are fading out. They are not supposed to be fading out. I was here. I can go ahead and get rid of something. Alright, regardless. I don't know anyway. I don't know exactly what that's. Let me just go to the there we go. Apologies, let's try that again. Let's see if this works now. So we can go ahead and go to our song and hit start. If all goes according to plan, these notes won't go away at the bottom. They do not. Nice. Now, I'll go ahead and just pause this. Okay, so as you can see, basically the notes are coming out the bottom here, right? And these notes are being generated on the beats per minute of the song. So as you can see, this song has a beats per minute of 155. If we go here, we can go ahead and go to a different song. This song has a beats per minute of 95, so the notes will be generated slower. This song isn't mine though, and I'm going to get copyright striked if I play that, so I can't do that. And we've got a little slider here to go through the song if we want to as well. But I won't cripple your ears with that. So basically the idea was we generate the notes on the actual thing like that. And then we'd go in the editor, and we'd like pause it in the game or whatever, and we'd be like, okay, actually I want this note over here, and I want a second one of these notes over here. And the BPM would just give you an idea of where you want the notes, kind of. It'd basically be a template that you build off of. But I didn't like that. I didn't like that you would have to use the editor, and then to actually save these notes, you'd have to like drag it into a prefab and then drag it back in and delete the existing notes and then like unpack the prefab. And I just thought it'd be annoying, especially because some of the people doing this might not really have Unity knowledge. So I wanted to do it entirely in the game. That also brings up the option for us to give this to the player later if they want to make their own tracks. And this is a preliminary version. I finished this last night, but this is what I came up with, right? So you can select your song, and you've got two ways of doing it. Either you can use AutoGen, and you can actually have it randomly generate and then go back through and edit it. So I'll show you what that looks like, right? We have two different key bindings. If you press A, W, or D, it'll create notes on these tracks. And if you press the actual arrow keys associated with these tracks, it'll delete the notes that are coming down. So that's how you actually get rid of notes. I might make it so you can like right click on them and delete them as well, and left click them and drag them. That's what I'm hoping of doing. But let's go ahead and try this out, right? So we can hit start here on the auto generate. It'll make some stuff. Right. And then let's say that we scroll back through the song and we decide, actually, I don't like this part right here. I don't like these four. So what you can do is you can play it. And then once you come to it, you press the arrow keys associated with them to delete them as you would if you were actually playing the game. So now we've gotten rid of those four. And if we were to save this song, those four wouldn't be in the recording. But I also realized this wasn't really getting me where I wanted to. The randomness was just too random. So I made manual mode, right? So what that means is we can go ahead and play the song, and wherever I press W, it'll place a key in the middle here. If I press A, it'll place it in the left. If I press D, it'll place it in the right. So it's fairly simple to go along the beat of the song like this. And I'll just go ahead and do that so you can check it out. So as you can see, now I've generated this thing according to the beat of the song, just by pressing the buttons. And if I wanted to, I could scroll back through and I could delete some of them and I could replay it. If I go into test mode, then I can press the actual arrow keys, and it won't delete them. It'll just make them bob up and down so I can see how it feels. As you can see, this is synced with the beat of the song, because we created it ourselves a few seconds ago. This lets us do much crazier designs. So I think that feels quite good, right? Let's say I like that. What I can do now is I can go to save recording, and it'll bring up a little prompt for me, and I can choose where I want to save this. So let's go to our desktop, and we'll just call it demo.xml. Cool? Cool. Now let's say it's saving, and give it a second. Did it do it? There we go. Now let's say we come back to this later and we're like, oh, I want to go keep working on that song that I made, right? Or that track that I was working on editing. We can go in here and we can hit load recording, demo.xml, and it'll find out which song we were on. It's not updating it on this list, but it is on the right one. I'll do it manually just for show. And if we go to our scene, you'll see that it's made all the notes that we had saved. Now, I can open that XML file that we just saved to show you what that's actually looking like. But what it is that it's serializing a list of notes. I made note objects, and each note has a position that it was made in, XYZ, and what lane it was made in. So 0 is the left lane, 1 is the middle lane, and 2 is the right lane. And then the game goes back through this list of lanes once it reads the file and instantiates them in their correct positions and rotates them according to which lane they were in. So if we go ahead and replay this back now, I'll put it in test mode so we can actually try it, and I'll get it off of autogen, otherwise it'll keep making notes. You'll see that it is synced to the song, which took a heck of a lot of time because I was having a lot of trouble with getting this to generate right and save right for that matter. And let's say we wanted to add to it, so now we've added this little tail end part. We can go ahead and do save recording again, and we'll override the demo that we made earlier. And now we can keep adding on to our song. Now, oh yeah, and the XML file somewhere also saves what song it was made for, the actual name of the clip right there. So this one is Boss Music. That's the name of the actual clip in Unity. So that's what it looks for when you load the song. Now this is all fun and good, but it doesn't matter if we can't make it into an actual game, right? So if we go back to Rhythm Demo, I'll show you a quick difference. In our actual canvas structure for all this, the UI is using the Rhythm Controller script, which has all this stuff that it needs to work. In the Rhythm Demo, which is going to be the actual game kind of thing, it's using the Rhythm Runner script. I basically went back through, and meanwhile, this Rhythm Maker needs like 8 different scripts to function. There's an independent scroller script, there's a slider script, there's like buttons and the waveform and all that stuff, and a lot of stuff in here didn't need to exist. I went back through and I remade the scripts from scratch to only use the bare minimums that we needed to deserialize the notes, instantiate them, and play through the track. So there's a secondary script here called Rhythm Runner, which does everything that they do in these scripts that we need them to all in one script. So we're only using 2 scripts here actually. We're using this one and the selector script, which is the little squares here which allow you to actually select the notes. Now what this script does is you give it an XML recording name. So ideally what we're thinking is that each scene would come pre-made with its own XML recording name. And then when you go into a level, it would just load the scene, and off of start, it'll look for this XML recording inside of your resources folder. Now, this is a folder that Unity will generate automatically when you build a game. So if you put things in your resources folder, Unity will package it with your game. So if we take this demo.xml and plop it into our resources folder, now it's here right next to the previous one that I'd made. And I can go ahead and rename or tell it to look instead for the demo XML instead of the boss music XML. Now what it's going to do when we go ahead and hit play is it's going to find it. As you can see, it found it, and it's going to make it into a deserialized XML after about a 1-second delay, because I was having trouble if I didn't do that. So you'll see it found it. It found out by deserializing it, it found that we were using boss music for this clip. And it's gone ahead and generated all the notes that we made in our maker, including that last tail end that I overrid the recording for. So we can go ahead and play it. And it is in sync, which is a massive problem I had yesterday and spent a few hours fixing. So in a matter of about 30 seconds, I made a decent rhythm start to a song, entirely within the Unity game, not needing the editor at all. Saved it to a file format where it has permanency and can be shared to other people, and they can import it into the game and keep working on it and whatever. And is fairly lightweight, because these notes are not being generated as they scroll down. They're generated when you start the scene, and then they just scroll. So there's no runtime generation on this. And the actual overhead in the game is minimal. So I think this is quite a clever solution. There's a couple things that I would still like to add to this. Where am I going? Especially to the rhythm maker, I want to add an input field where you can specify how fast you want this to scroll, because right now I can't change the scrolling on the end of the actual player, and by the player I mean like the demo, like the actual game, and because that'll throw off where the notes are positioned. So unless I manually made an algorithm to like move the notes farther apart from each other depending on the scroll speed, which I could do, I wouldn't be able to do that from this end. I would have to do it from the maker end. So what I'm thinking of doing is just adding an input field so that they can type, like the person making the song can type in what scroll speed they want. The scroll speed that you've seen so far is 8, I believe. I can confirm that though. Oh yeah, this is here. Yeah, scroll speed 8. So they can type in whatever scroll speed they want, and I'm gonna have it instantiate into the actual XML file. So when it loads the saved recording, it'll load which clip it belongs to, it'll make the notes, and it'll set the scroll speed accordingly. And obviously the positions are going to be offset properly because the scroll speed was also made like that in this maker. So that's the plan. Everything else seems to be working so far. The demo is a nice showing. I think it looks visually decent, even though these are literally just solid colors, and we're going to have a much more refined thing once we have more UI assets. The background is just being blurred right now, which I think looks cool by this scroller blur. So it's not actually like being blocked out by the UI, it's just being blurred. And I can manage that blur fairly easily. In fact, I might turn it up a little bit like that. Which I think gives it a nice sleek aspect to it. So I think that's about it. I think we've gone over pretty much everything. This is quite a long video already, so we'll cut it off here. But that pretty much goes over everything so far, and I guess we'll be back once we have more to report. So that was devblog number 1. See you next time.